This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And Sean, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. You have an interesting near-death experience because basically you accidentally killed yourself.
Yeah.
And you had a very interesting experience after that. So why don't you step us through it? And then once we're all done, we'll ask some questions.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess I'll start with how my life was on just the day prior. I was in the midst of my business failing. It was literally one of the worst times of my life. I had spent quite a few years trying to build up the business, and then we had a whole bunch of things. It was just a house of cards just collapsed, and it ended up bringing down everything. So we ended up having to sell the house. We ended up in a rental, which quickly became untenable. And I wasn't a very nice person back then. I don't think. Looking back, I think I was kind of like an asshole. I was very emotionally locked down. Wouldn't allow anyone in. Even at that point, I didn't think I even had emotions at that time. I always thought I was very two-dimensional as far as emotions went. And then we got to the point on June 11th of 2020 that we had to move out. And I ended up going to down to the basement, and there was a bucket of paint because I had to do some touch-ups. And there was a bucket of paint, and I was super tired because I'd been working on a condo that we were going to move into that had the floor collapse. So I was fixing that place up so we can move into it. So we were moving in from leaving our rental and moving into a condo that we were able to keep. And I was just exhausted, super tired. And there was this bucket, and I don't know if anyone knows about this, but it's like a 5-gallon bucket with a pull top. And I went down there, and the paint from the painter had covered it all, and I was trying to pull it off, and I couldn't pull it off. And I should have went upstairs and got my screwdriver, but then I was thinking, screw that. I'm going to I'll use my pocket knife. And so I have a pocket knife, the blade's about this big. And I went down, and I was just trying to pry at it. And all of a sudden it popped. And as it popped, it ended up going straight into my arm. And it ended up nicking an artery. And surprisingly, it didn't hurt. That was the first one of the many surprises, but that was the first surprise where it didn't hurt at all. I barely even felt it. And it popped out instantly, and then blood started gushing out everywhere. And I threw my hand on it super fast, and I clamped down as hard as I could. And I ran upstairs yelling for my wife at the time you have to drive me to the hospital. You have to drive me. And so I was running out onto the driveway. I didn't get a drop of blood. I got it all over the floor in the basement, but upstairs didn't get a drop on the main floor. So that was a positive. And so we get out. I'm running to the car, and I hear her behind me. She's like, "I'm not driving you. There's no way." And I turn around, and I was like, "I don't understand why." And I turned around and looked like an elk had got shot. It was just blood everywhere. And I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'm probably not going to make it then." So I told her to call 911, and I went over to my truck and dropped down the tailgate. And I was leaning on the tailgate, and I thought for sure I'd be able to hold enough pressure that it would end up stop bleeding. Cause I used to be a paramedic. I'm a crane operator now, but I used to be a paramedic, and it would not stop. I was pushing so hard that I ended up snapping my muscles in my forearm, and half of it went up into my shoulder, and the other half balled up in my wrist. And so I was holding it, and ended up filling my tailgate, and I was starting to get woozy at this time. So then I was like, I should lean up and go sit up against the garage door. So I kind of wobbled over, went onto the garage door and slid down, and I was sitting there. My wife had brought me a rag, like a dish towel, and I was holding that on, trying to stop it, but it would not stop. It was insane how fast it was going. And this was only in a matter of like a minute, maybe at this time. And I started getting really woozy. I started laying down. I asked her to bring over the kids' wagon, and I propped my arm up and tried to put myself in the recovery position to try and just slow down. And it started slowing down to where it was just like a drip, and the whole rag was soaked. And I remember thinking before that I had asked if I should put on a tourniquet, but for some reason 911 said don't, which was super odd. Like normally, like the protocol is like if it's bad enough that you can't stop the bleeding from direct pressure, you should put on a tourniquet. And for that reason, they didn't actually give me a reason, or Sarah at the time, but they didn't give her a reason. They just said don't put a tourniquet on. And our ambulance was only 5 minutes away, but they ended up taking 22 minutes, which was another oddity. So I was laying there, and all my senses started getting enhanced. I could smell like everything. I could smell like the coppery smell of the blood, and I could feel the sun. Like this, that's the biggest part I remember, is the feeling of heat from the sun on my face and my body as I was laying there on the ground. And then my vision started going white at the edges, and slowly started filling my entire vision. The voices of my wife and the neighbor were slowly fading away. And then all of a sudden, the next thing I know is I'm looking at somebody on the ground from above, and I can see this guy. He's laying there, and he looks terrible, like super terrible. And there's blood everywhere. And it took me at least a couple seconds to realize, oh wait, that's not somebody else. That's me. And then as soon as I recognized it was me, I shot up straight into the air, like straight up towards the sky. And it felt like I was on like a rocket ship. Like it felt like it was insane G's kind of thing. And I was shot up, and I ended up in this black void. And there was this white light far away, and it started getting closer and closer and closer until it ended up being huge. And if I kind of describe it as like if you took white ink and dropped it on from above and dropped it on a black piece of paper, that's kind of what it looked like. So the edges weren't perfect or anything. It was kind of like torn away and drops everywhere, and it was moving. And I remember getting closer and closer, and I could feel other presences around me going towards it as well. It kind of reminded me of the Disney film Soul. I don't know if you've seen that, but when the character ends up going on this escalator towards this light, it kind of reminds me of that. I didn't see anyone else. And then as it got closer and closer and closer, I was only like a couple feet away from it. I end up, that all disappeared, and I was instantly in a meadow. And this meadow, it was picturesque. And that was one of the fun. I remember thinking this at the time. I was thinking, wow, this is really stereotypical. Like, this is exactly what I kind of expect. I wasn't expecting to go here, but it was definitely stereotypical. And I thought that was pretty funny. And it was beautiful. It had green grass and yellow grass. And it was about like a couple feet high, and there was flowers, like pink and blue flowers. And like, I've loved nature, but I never really, really paid attention to it at the time. And there was beautiful little butterflies flying around. The smell was incredible. It was like perfect dew and flower. Like, it was an overwhelming sense. And then, and then there was also a babbling brook, which I found really funny, and a single lone tree, like further in the distance, right beside this babbling brook. And I remember thinking, yeah, this is exactly what, this is super stereotypical, which I still find it really funny. And then I felt this presence around me and behind me. And they were talking to me, but not talking verbally. It was like a telepathic communication, and it wasn't in a language I understood or heard. It's nothing I can replicate myself, but I understood what they were saying. So, and they said that I can stay here with them, but and it's okay. Like there's no wrong choice here. I can stay with them, or I can go back. And at that second, I was like, well, why would I go back? This is way nicer. I had felt an intense like feeling of love and compassion, and that all the wrongs that I had done or any mistakes that I'd done, it was okay. That like everything was fine. And at that second, I was like, I had already made my decision. I was like, I'm not coming back. And they said, well, before you decide, we have something to show you. And then I was all of a sudden inside this library. I think now it might be like the Akashic Library or something like that. But it was a giant library. And it was, if you ever been to St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, it's bigger than that. And that was one of the most impressive buildings I've ever seen. And it's huge. Like this library is giant. And there's these giant books like this big and like this thick with these really thick leather spines on them. They were like super ornate. And there's just levels and levels and levels of all these bookshelves along this wide hall. And I started getting led. And again, I knew they were there, but I couldn't see anybody else. And I could feel like there was a lot of feeling of other presences around, but I couldn't see anyone else. It was like it was just me there. And I was getting led down this hallway, and onto the right, there was this room, and they led me into this room, and there was another giant room with more books and more windows, like stained glass windows and wood paneling. It was super beautiful. And in the middle of this room was this table with a single leg and this dome on top. And on this dome, there was I can see, it's hard to describe because when I can't really see it, but I have this feeling of it. And what I remember have this feeling of is that there was a tree, and it was the roots were all my different choices that had led me from my past, had led me to this moment, which was this tree trunk. And no matter what I did, it all led to this moment, this choice, this moment here, right then. And then when the tree trunk ends and goes to the branches, that's the choices of the future. And then it turns into roots again, and then back to a tree trunk, and then branches, and it keeps going where there's all these different choices, but there's always these specific points in my life that I'm going to hit. No, and there's no way to avoid it. It's just things I have to go through, and it's part of my journey. And if anyone's seen the new Spider-Man movie, I think it's called Across the Universe. It's a cartoon. My kids love it. And in there, they call it the canon events. So it's events that Spider-Man can't avoid. It's very similar to that. And so I don't know what I saw that made me come back, but the next thing I know is, and I don't remember making the choice either. That's the other thing. I don't remember making a choice saying, yes, I'll go back. The next thing I knew is after I'd seen that, I was waking up to paramedics yelling at me to wake up, and that they were going to put a tourniquet on me and give me an IV, and asking me if there was anybody else in the house, because they thought it was like a fight or something. It was just me. And so they put me into the ambulance, and they gave me the IV of saline solution, and my blood pressure was 35 over 45 or 45 over 35. I can't remember, but it was super low. And when I had done a trauma course a couple months later, after I was like halfway healed, the chances of survival were 5% with that low of blood loss, or that amount of blood loss. And so then went to surgery, And they didn't actually end up giving me any blood transfusions, which I still find a little odd. Yeah, I didn't get any blood transfusions. They just gave me a saline solution, and I was able to compensate really fast. And it took me a long time to recover. And before this, I was an atheist or near atheist. I always left a little bit of a crack of like a door, so that just in case kind of thing. Super materialistic and an asshole and a bunch of stuff. And now it's way different. My whole life is done like a 180. Yeah, it's really weird looking at it. I consider that moment in time my flip moment. Jeffrey Kripal has a great book on these flip moments where you have a spiritual awakening or something very meaningful happens that changes your life and your life's course. And that's what it feels like for me.
And it's so interesting because so many people who have near-death experiences come back and they do have this huge transformation, which to me really is proof that these events actually did happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
One thing, when I was listening to you tell your story in your podcast, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you had mentioned that you were told this is your last chance.
Yeah.
So what did that mean?
Yeah, for some reason I forgot to mention that. So they told me it was my last chance, and after reflecting on it, and this is just recently that I've come to this reflection actually, and even though it's been a couple of years, I never really thought about it a lot, but it kept reverberating in my mind. So it was like an echo that was constantly there. And I think if I hadn't had that message of this is your last chance, like you only got one more kick at the can, I think I could have easily slipped back into old patterns and old ways of doing things, of old, like trying to make it through money and all these different ways, instead of really what I think has become my life's work. I think right now at this point is finding my internal balance inside and healing from all the other things that have happened in my life. And I think if I hadn't had that, I think I definitely would have slipped back. So at the time I thought it scared the shit out of me, and like, holy crap, like I only got one more chance, but I didn't have any guidance. I didn't have like any way, like, where am I supposed to go with this? Like, I just knew something had to change. And I think what that message did was gave me the push or the kick to change literally everything in my life. And yeah, there's hardly anything that's the same in my life because of it.
And what would have happened if you messed up? Does that mean, boom, you don't exist anymore? Does it mean you don't get a chance to come back to Earth? I mean, what did it mean that it was your last chance? What was the consequences if you failed?
I don't think there was any. I think it's just a message specifically for my personality.
Okay.
Because I view a lot of the NDEs or any type of experiences as very personalized.
Right.
So some messaging that someone might get that doesn't quite jive with you or versus somebody else, I think it's because it's whatever resonates with you internally that at that time. Because I know there's been a lot of information since then, because I've been doing lots of research and everything that didn't resonate with me when I first approached it. And then a couple of years later, I'd approach it again. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I totally understand this now, or at least a little bit more. And it kind of jives with how I'm feeling at this moment. In Hermeticism, one of my favorite things is that there's different levels to everything. And so then, as above, so below. So in Hermeticism, they say one of the tenets is that when you're ready, you'll understand that particular level, and then you'll get reintroduced to it, and you'll find another level. So it's like an onion of all these different knowledges and everything. So the meaning continually changes to ourselves. So that, yeah, I think that's what it means to me.
Sean, you said you were an atheist, or at least almost an atheist.
Yeah.
So did that matter when you were in this heavenly realm?
I don't think so. No, not for me. For me, it didn't. All I got was an insane amount of love and compassion, and it didn't even. I didn't even have the. There wasn't even a feeling of judgment of any choices I had made up until that point. There was multiple paths for me to get there. This was always going to happen. This was always part of my journey. That something was going to happen, and I'd almost died a couple times before this. I'd almost died on a mountain. I've I died once from an allergic reaction where the paramedic had given me way too much epinephrine, and I have this rare, it's called hyperanaphylaxis, and so my body compensates extremely well. And if I get epinephrine and adrenaline, it actually caused me to have a heart attack. And at that time, this was a couple years before 2020. At that time, all I saw was a bunch of red, and it was hot. So, but that didn't seem to work. So I needed another kick, I think. And yeah, I don't think any of the choices that I made or the mistakes I've made have made me the person I am today. And I think that's the biggest point, is that no matter where you are in your life, and no matter what has happened in your life, or any choices, or who you've hurt, or anything, I think dealing with that and being able to find the compassion for yourself and not just others, I think that's the big thing. And that, yeah, I think there is no judgment on the other side, because we all make mistakes, and you're allowed to find. It's just like being a toddler. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt others sometimes, but it's all about learning.
And I do find it so fascinating that you said, you're going to hit these main points, but there were so many paths that you could take to get to those points. And a lot of people I found have trouble with the fact that our lives are sort of pre-planned in advance. But I think it seems like what you're saying is, yes, you do have these things that are planned, but there are lots of routes to get there.
Yeah. It's how I view it, is it's like choose your own adventure. And and there's easy ways to get through life, and there's other ways. I was super stubborn. I was fighting against like the universe, and fighting against what internally was calling me. I was listening to others' opinions more than myself. I was looking for external validation, external love, and all these different options, which made my life way harder. Like, it was way harder than it had to be. And that was my own damn fault. And there's paths that I could have taken. And I can look back at certain paths where I could have pulled the plug on my business way prior, and I would have saved myself. It would have been the same outcome, no matter what. There's no way that business was going to work. I was with the wrong partner. I was in the wrong industry. It was never going to work. It's not something I was passionate about. It was just there to like make a buck. And so that was never going to work. And there was tons of clear signs. Like, there's signs everywhere. There was like flashing neon signs, like stop what you're doing. Like, this isn't working. And, but I just ignored it all. I thought I knew better. And now, I kind of go with almost like a Taoism mentality, which is I go with the flow. So I plan a little bit, but I allow the universe to surprise me a bit more. That's how I do it.
That's a fun way to think about it, is to let the universe surprise us. Sean, one of the things that you mentioned was you were heading toward this light, and then boom, all of a sudden you're in this meadow. So was that meadow part of the light? Had you gone into it, or was it something separate?
I don't know. It's almost like a threshold. It was like, as soon as I touched that threshold, I was instantly in this other space. Mm-hmm. And if you start doing some research on like Robert Monroe, or for like out of body experiences or different NDEs and stuff, there seems to be these different layers and realms of different dimensions. Like, who knows what it is? Like, we seem to be getting prepped for multiverses in the popular culture. So I'm sure that has something to do with it, and with quantum physics too. And that it could have just been a portal or a way for me to transition my mind to be able to be prepared in order to get there. I've never actually really thought about that. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah. I think it was a way to prepare me to be able to not have a complete meltdown on the other side, maybe.
And when you were in the meadow, you said it was kind of stereotypical of what near-death experiencers describe. But near-death experiencers also often say that it's beyond description. So was this like a meadow that we would see here on Earth, or was it different than that?
It was way more beautiful than any meadow I've seen. And I live by the Rockies up here in Canada. And it's some of the most beautiful scenery you'll see in the world. And it was more beautiful than that in a way that's hard to describe. Everything was kind of like glowing, twinkling almost. And it looked like it was like looking through a bubble. It's really hard to describe. I don't think I'm good enough with words to be able to describe how beautiful it was. Yeah, everything had like a glow to it. Almost. It was like a feeling of a glow, I guess. Not visually.
Almost like it was alive?
Yeah, like you were connected to everything. It's like every blade of grass, every butterfly. I don't know if if any of your audience has ever done psychedelics, but it's kind of like that when you're on on a high hero dose of mushrooms. It's kind of similar to that, where it has this twinkle. And it's got this energy, and you can feel this energy. Yeah.
It sounds fascinating. Another place that I found really fascinating was the library, because that is something that I've heard from other people. And I'm trying to visualize it. And I imagine this kind of old wood, walls and just kind of antique-ish. Is that what it is? Or how would you describe it? I know you said it's huge. So what Sean shares next is really fascinating. It took me into an area I did not expect. So let's go ahead and take that into part 2. For those of you that have made it this far, please leave the words "made it" in the comments just to let me know. And then also, if you have anything that you want to share in the comments, some of the things that you liked or you were intrigued by, please go ahead and share that. And if you liked what you've seen, please give it a thumbs up. So hopefully I'll see you in part 2. Thanks so much for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. That was part 1. Make sure to listen to part 2. And if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for more episodes.